Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. I wonder whether or not you watched the Rings of Power trailer, and I knew the answer to the question, but I figured I'd ask it anyway.
Okay, I swear, when I pulled up the rundown earlier to do the summary,
Yeah.
I saw it on the list, and I told myself I still need to watch that. And then as soon as we started talking during the pre-show, I'm looking at the rundown and I'm like, oh crap, I forgot. And I have nothing against Lord of the Rings. I don't. I am, however, this is post Game of Thrones and Game of Thrones prequel. It's coming. And so I don't know. To me, these are going to be very similar shows, and I have an allegiance already.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I did watch the trailer today. It dropped, and yeah, I really like this. I think the more I see of it, the more I'm warming to it. And I was, clearly it's a set, it's in the second age of Middle Earth, before all the things in the Hobbit and of course the Lord of the Rings itself, and it definitely leans into some of the Peter Jackson stuff, but it's clearly establishing their own vibe and themes with this story that they're telling, and visuals were I was like, all right, TV budget, good special effects. It looks very competent, and Amazon is really putting a lot into this thing because I think they're already committed to 5 years for the series. So, this is one of those ones I'm looking forward to, and I know I will join you on your Game of Thrones prequel ride as well.
You hear that, everyone? We're doing Game of Thrones prequel.
Yes. Yep, we are.
That should be fun. And I mean, we'll probably end up doing some of that. I don't know. It all depends on what's really grabbing our attention and when things are dropping, because there's going to be a bunch of stuff coming end of August, early September.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's what the last year has been like lows and highs of content. So definitely. Anyways, on that note, we do have some news to cover before we get into the finales that everyone has been talking about for last week. First is Emmy nominations, which I looked at earlier today, and I keep hearing all of these snub. I'm like, okay, but Succession is nominated 5 billion times in every category. So I think they got it right.
Not biased at all, right? No, but
I found it really funny going through the nominations, and I feel as though half of their cast is nominated in the Best Actor category alone.
Yeah. It's there were other shows on between June 1 of 2021 and May 30 of
Absolutely. That's why you have Squid Games on the list. And Squid Games, I have a feeling they're going to get most of the awards. I don't think Succession will. I actually have a feeling that it's going to go to Squid Games.
Yeah, I think Squid Games. Yeah. So, I was just looking at a chart. So, Succession had 25 nominations. Ted Lasso and The White Lotus are both tied at 20. Squid Game had 14. Yeah. And some of those are in the acting categories as well as Best Drama. So, but I think Squid Game definitely will probably win Best Drama. I mean, obviously it was a history-making nomination with the international show nominated. And so, and I haven't finished Squid Game. I've gotten about halfway through it. It's just because it's this. I mean, it's nothing bad about it. It's just I just haven't finished it. But just like Ozark, but I did enjoy it, and it definitely was one of those shows that definitely captured the moment. Sort of reminds me a lot, for example, of Stranger Things, which also got a few nominations, but none in the acting categories.
So Squid Games, I did watch. I watched it with a friend who never wanted to watch anything with me again because I did not like it. I am one of the very few people who actually did not like the show. I felt like it telecasted a lot of its story points, and that season, if you break it down, like the further you get, the more it's just like, okay, I see what's going on here. Why are we? I don't. It didn't hit the way it was supposed to. I never cried, and I say that because there is one episode where you're really supposed to, by the end of it, supposed to be crying, and yeah, I was not at all. That being said, I understand why it's nominated. I also understand why so many people watched it. If I had my pick of foreign television shows, Vincenzo should have been on here because I love that show, and that is a K-drama. Vincenzo.
Yeah. I know I know we've talked about it, and you had very, very positive things to say about it. So, yeah, I mean, and to your point with that, with shows that should have been nominated, I think that's the thing. Just looking at the list, I mean, basically the nominators all just kind of got locked in on just very familiar things on streaming services. I mean, it's just like when you look at it, it's just you go down the list and it's Succession, Ted Lasso, Marvelous Miss Maisel, Euphoria. I mean, it's just like Severance. I mean, it's just like on and on. This and also repeated actors in the same category. Right. It's just like just like the shows cannibalize themselves with multiple actors being nominated for within the same category. So it's sort of like, okay, y'all. I mean, I know there's a lot of content out there, but there's quite a few things that probably should have gotten a sniff at a nomination beyond just the technical categories, like our MCU shows, for example, that maybe should have gotten some breakthrough in some of the acting categories. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
But also, yeah. But I mean, but streaming services are basically like have taken over the world, because I think as far as this regular network television, like This Is Us, for example, and Blackish and others, nowhere to be found.
Well, This Is Us just didn't have a good season. Like, as a fan and avid watcher of that show, the last season, I liked it. I wasn't in love with it. They didn't have some very, how do I put it, dynamic points that it had in previous seasons. And I mean, I think it's harder with the Emmys, where you have these TV shows with these ensemble casts, and you're only limited to so many nominations, but it's hard when you're looking performance comparatively, and it just so happens maybe all of the best performances were in one show. Like, and for a moment I thought Kieran Culkin wasn't nominated for best actor, and I was like, wait a second. Oh no, he's there. Okay, thank God.
There. Yep. Yeah, he's there.
I mean, Jeremy Strong might win it, or somebody else. I don't know, but I don't know. I think it's hard, and I also, when you say familiar streaming services, Severance, this was its first year, so that show. Yeah. It's getting accolades. It probably should have gotten more, and maybe that's what you were getting at. And then Euphoria, that season too. Damn.
Yeah. Well, that's just I mean, but there's also like things like Yellowstone that also has a lot of buzz that was shut out. So it's kind of like So that's what I mean about it for me. I mean, there's a lot of buzzworthy shows out there that probably had a lot of strong performances but people just went with the familiar things. I know Severance was the exception there, given that it is the first season, but like Succession, HBO basically it's HBO's world, and everybody else just has to get whatever little crumbs they can get. Same because because after after Succession and Euphoria, it's like, okay.
We own this city.
Yep. Which didn't get anything. Again, another show that really should.
Was it eligible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It didn't
was
get
eligible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Emmys, do better.
Nope.
But I've had a problem with Emmys ever since they nominated Millie Bobby Brown, so I've had my issues with it. And I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I fully agree, but yeah, I think we've given Emmys enough talk.
Yeah, let's move on.
What else? Alden Ehrenreich has joined the cast of the MCU show Ironheart. So is that coming out next year?
I believe next year, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and don't know what the role is. All we know, according to the story I read, I think in Deadline, was that he is apparently a key role, but beyond that, Marvel hasn't made any comment.
Yeah. He's just looking for his redemption, so he gets cast more ever since Solo. And also in MCU news, Hailee Steinfeld. I feel like we already knew this, but it's been returning for several Marvel projects.
Yep. I know we got. So maybe she'll show up in Echo and some other things as well.
Russo Brothers have talked about Secret Wars.
They were doing the premiere of the Gray Man that's premiering on Netflix, and they were asked about would they come back to Secret Wars as their dream Marvel project, and they were like, well, we would, but it would be a massive undertaking if we did it, because it's just so, that's such a seminal work in the Marvel comic universe that they just felt that it would be hard to make, and obviously the stakes of it trying to top Endgame and Infinity War would also just add to it. So, but Kevin Feige keeps teasing things for Comic-Con, so maybe we'll get some news in the next week or so. We shall see.
We'll get some MCU news, definitely. Speaking about this is just all MCU, in case anybody is noticing the theme.
There was a Reddit post about Fantastic Four.
It was like an article.
It was an article, but it was based off a Reddit post. So, yeah. So the what it was about was whether or not John Krasinski was coming back to play Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four movie, and there were other rumors as well in this supposed alleged leak about the things that are upcoming in the MCU. One was
where the whole Penn Badgley casting came from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see the headlines from these Reddit posts. I just don't necessarily sit down and read the article. But in my opinion, they killed that character in I was just about to say WandaVision.
It should have been WandaVision Part 2.
2.5. Sorcerer Supreme. But they killed that character, and from what I've also heard is that Feige had John do that cameo purposely as like saying, okay, this is what the fans want, so we're going to show it to them, but not necessarily long term have it be. So from that perspective, and I think we even talked about that during our spoiler review of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, is that if they recast that character, like no harm, no foul, because we've already seen that character in one universe, and honestly, not the best. Yeah. Real easily.
Yeah, true, and part of that could just be the way that Reed Richards was just written for that cameo, and
right, absolutely.
So there, in addition to Reed Richards, and of course Penn Badgley being one of the top choices for Reed, it also tossed several names around for Fantastic Four, including Melissa Benoist, Kylan McGuffey, Natalie Dyer from Stranger Things, Jahil Jerome, and a couple others as well. So, of course, It's all of this could just be, you know, normally I don't put this like rumor kind of stuff on here, but it just seemed pretty fascinating given that we just had such Marvel talk and we're on the heels of Comic-Con. So maybe we'll get some confirmation or flat out like this is bullshit, you know, in the next week when the Marvel shows up. But I guess a week from Saturday.
Feige is going to confirm what he wants and what he can confirm. He's never really given a lot of bullshit. No. There's been far fewer delays with promises about projects MCU related than there has been with DC projects.
Yeah. So. True. Yeah. And also, I mean, they're going to obviously hold some things back too, because they do have their D23 event coming up in September as well. So even if we don't get like all, you know, I'm sure we'll get some amazing news a week from Saturday, but at the same time, we'll probably also get, a whole heck of a lot more whenever they have their in-house event in September.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And last but not least, Daniel Kaluuya is not returning for Black Panther 2. Black Panther 2, this movie needs to come out.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, there's been so much around it, and I feel like we're going to get a point with this movie, but that by the time the movie actually drops, there's going to be so many theories, so much speculation that I wonder if it's going to have a hard time with expectations, you know?
Yeah. Well, Daniel Kaluuya's issue was it was a scheduling conflict because of all the issues with this film. He conflicted with Nope. So that's really what it boiled down to with him. But you're right. I agree with you that there's just been so much, and I guess the weight of Chadwick's untimely passing, how much that's going to overshadow anything that's done with this film, as far as just the fans' expectations and the fact that they chose not to recast T'Challa.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely be a part of the conversation. It's never going to be separated from that conversation with any movie of that in that franchise moving forward. But no, that's what it is. And so that wraps up the news category. And so on that note, we get to talk about The Boys season 3 finale. It's over, people.
The
season has ended. It came and now it's gone.
I know it's going to be weird not tuning into The Boys on Friday evening. What do you think about the finale?
So I'm kind of with a lot of people about the finale, or from what I hear, share a lot of sentiments about the finale, where it felt really quick. And there were things that seemed a bit rushed. I think it tied up all of the loose ends. And I really appreciate how the season was so much about, or started with Ryan and Butcher, and like this father-son thing going on. And then Homelander is without family, and that's all he's ever wanted. And then to see that journey and have him confronted by his own family and rejected by his blood, but then Ryan's there who is a kid and who just sees like the in-place father abandon him, and so then and the biological father return and be nice. It's natural for a kid to be like, oh, well, he loves me, so I'm going to go with him because you just rejected me. So I like how Ryan was used in a way where we saw him at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was enough time to not necessarily forget about him, but kind of not have him in your line of sight. And then this episode happens and you're like, okay, all right. So father-son team next year. But I do think that the longer this show goes on, and I think we touched on this last week, is just like, how many seasons of The Boys versus Homelander can there be?
Yeah.
Reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the writers do each season, they do figure out a way to raise the bar even higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I know their writers' room and Eric Kripke is up to the challenge, but there's only this like you said last week beautifully, you can only get back to the status quo so many times, because I mean that's basically what has happened now the last 3 seasons. We have these moments. We were trying to end Homelander, and then at the end we're back at the status quo of Homelander and the boys have a big showdown for whatever reason, and then Homelander walks off, Butcher goes off, and then now we got. I mean, some of the new things that we have to play with for next season is, of course, Butcher getting his prognosis of a year to 18 months as far as his life expectancy now due to taking the compound. Attempt B, there's now Homelander has gone full like, I can do whatever the heck I want and just publicly be open about, the proverbial thing, not to get political, but, there was always, they did go there with like a very notable public figure killing someone in the middle of Times Square and can get away with it. They went there. And so there is, so they did advance some things to carry the four-way story forward for to set up things for next year. And I agree with you. I mean, I did love the way they did this whole father-son dynamic with Butcher, Homelander, and Soldier Boy throughout, and they sprinkled it throughout the season so that when we got to that moment in Vault Towers, and you had Homelander and Soldier Boy standing there, and I mean, when I was watching that real time, I really did not know how that was all going to go down. I
knew the moment Homelander started crying, I was like, oh God, he's going to hate that. Ryan, get out now. Soldier Boy, they really did a good job, especially in the previous episode, of just explaining via cartoons how much of an asshole Soldier Boy is.
Yeah.
So the moment that Homelander started crying, I was like, nah, he's gonna reject you. This is not. There might have been hope, but but Homelander was way too vulnerable in that moment. Like he doesn't know him. Like biologically that's his father, but he doesn't know his father and the personality. So
yeah.
I understand that. But to go back to your point about the status quo, I completely agree that, again, but what I do admire about this writer's room is that even though they reset the game, they definitely, and I think more so this season finale than in past season finales, they've definitely put some people in some interesting places, because Annie, she this season went on, I think, the most complete journey, where by the end of it, she throws out her costume and she's like, fuck it. I am powerful and I'm just going to be me and they're going to like me. And so now that she not only is not part of the Seven, but she is embracing this idea of being on the boys, I think that'll set up an interesting dynamic next season. And then Maeve, man, I always loved Maeve, and I was so worried that they were going to kill her. And then, of course, when she turned out to be alive, I was mad. Because you should in shows like these, you should be fearful of them killing your character, that you're like one of your favorite characters off. Yeah. That shows that there are stakes. But when they don't fully commit, it makes me question things as much as I'm like, yes, that means that they're still a player. Right. Albeit she doesn't have her powers. She has one eye. She's like retired from the game at this point. So I like how she wasn't seen a whole lot this season, but every time they did use her, it was leading up till this mass, which I wasn't expecting. I was definitely expecting Homelander, Butcher, Soldier Boy, but I was not expecting Homelander versus Maeve.
Yeah, that was that fight. You know, because again, she knows some of his vulnerabilities, and she called him. You know, because to your point about Homelander showing vulnerability emotionally, she took advantage of that in the situation.
You felt like you were watching not necessarily an even playing field, but as even as you could get, because I not only was I not expecting it, but they managed to act it out in a way where it completely overshadowed the other fight that had more players and Soldier Boy, but in reality, we've already seen that fight, and I mean, there's emotional stakes because you know the history, you know how much Homelander has put her through, even to the point where there's a whole like decades worth of history that we haven't seen.
Yeah, exactly, and you know, and speaking to that vulnerability. I think back to the moment in the cell where she was like, "Oh, is that concealer?" And so, and then how she left things with like, this is the top 3 moments in my life, seeing you, And so she went into that fight, whatever she basically when she tossed the poison compound that Frenchie had for the for Soldier Boy. I mean, she was pretty much, she knew what was going to go down when they went to Ball Tower. She's like, yeah, y'all think y'all have this thing planned, but no, Homelander's mine.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And she went for it, and man, she was so close. But see, again, I like how, due to other things, the writers do a good job of writing themselves into these corners and then writing themselves out in a way that makes sense, that doesn't come out of nowhere. Given what we know about each character and the relationships that are at play. So there was that, as well as forget who else I was going to mention. But then we also have Newman make the play, take some political steps.
Newman, so that's another thing too, because they set the stage for that when she and Homelander made their deal, and we never knew what was, we knew Homelander got the address for Ryan,
right?
But we never knew what the other part of it was. So whenever, again, with the moment where Deep and A-Train and Ashley are there, and, Homelander's like whispers to Deep, but Deep's like, that's treason. But Deep is just such a sick, such a Homelander sycophant, and won't accept it just as much as Homelander does. He goes out and kills the senator,
Well, and I think that's what is interesting about the relationship of the seven themselves is that Homelander talks about how they're family, they're the seven, and all of them want acceptance because none of them. I mean, A-Train gets rejected by his brother this episode.
Yep.
The Deep wife is now on a book tour called Into Deep.
Yeah.
All of it is like these villains, and we've spoken about this before, is that these villains, these characters you are not supposed to like, over the course of 3 seasons, even Homelander to an extent, there's this, because they are in such desperation to be accepted and to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
We view that as being empathetic to their cause and to because as people in general, that's all we want. We just want acceptance.
Yeah.
And so like, it's just, it amazes me how much, if you take that scene, it's like the family meeting from hell.
Yeah. I mean,
the boys style.
It's like Homelander is like the narcissistic parent that, like,
right.
Yeah, and with these, and then you have these 4 kids who will do anything for that acceptance, for that narcissistic parent.
And next season we're gonna see the real kid.
Yeah.
And what happens with him, but I don't know. It's just, as like I said before, this episode in particular didn't hit as much as the previous 2, but those previous 2 episodes, it's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
However, I think in terms of concluding everything it set up this season, it made a lot of sense.
It did. I mean, one other thing I thought about when we were talking about Maeve and how they sort of set the stage for like several things. Because, since they did not kill her, and we saw what happened with Soldier Boy and Kamiko earlier in the season, and then putting Soldier Boy back on ice,
right?
I see a potential way of bringing Maeve getting her powers back.
Good call. It's, yes, you don't want the powers, but the moment you have them, you're infinitely more vulnerable to everything. And so that's a very good call. Last but not least, they did kill, quote unquote, one character, Black Noir.
Yeah.
Now I say quote unquote because this is Eric Kipke.
Yep. And he's already.
And I watched a little like summary episode review with him, Jensen, and others from the cast, and they even said Eric has a way of killing characters, but leaving the door open for them to come back. And we have seen, if I'm not mistaken, Black Noir get killed once in this series already.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Because I thought about that with the almonds. Because whenever they had the flashbacks,
I wasn't even thinking the almonds.
Yeah, but that was the one I was thinking of. I mean, I know you were thinking about another one, but I was thinking about like that moment too, because I remember, like, was it season 1 or 2 where he had the?
It was 2.
Yeah, and whenever he and
it was
Stan Edgar. But Annie, but whenever he had the flashback conversation with Stan Edgar when they were younger, and Stan was standing there eating the almonds.
Right.
And so I thought about that moment with Black Noir, and then, like you said, there was I guess when the house blew up.
I mean, they did so much work with him, and just given the situation, it makes I keep repeating myself, but I'm sorry. It's just this season finale, this episode makes sense.
Yeah.
There's nothing that the characters did that I was like, well, where did that come from?
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
But so it's just, to kill him, even though I loved him, and I still love him, and I hope to see him again, even though I don't want him to see him again. It's very hard with these shows because, like I said, that's the intention. It's a good thing to be worried that the character you like the most is going to die. It's not a bad thing, but it does become a bad thing when they keep surviving, and then you're like, okay, so what are we really doing here?
Yeah.
When's the last time Homelander killed someone that we heard about?
Yeah. Now there have been a few good players who have once they've gone to the great beyond, they have remained in the great beyond.
Yeah.
But with these core characters, and to your point that we were discussing last week, and thinking about it more as we talk about it tonight, they've made all these characters such three-dimensional individuals that whether they're quote unquote heroes like with the boys or the villains with the Seven, there's all these sympathetic touches. I mean, like the moments with Homelander and with Ryan and that whole thing where he's wanted the acceptance, and that's why I was like, because the way they set up this with Soldier Boy and the disappointment of his father, I was like, well, maybe. I mean, I see what you meant by like, yeah, you weren't surprised, but for me, I was surprised a bit because I was like, well, maybe they'll play a little different this time. But you're right. I mean, that Soldier Boy will have some sympathy for Homelander and be the good father. But you're right. At the end of the day, I mean, Soldier Boy is just was such an asshole. He was all about himself, and that's so when he said you're such an effing disappointment, then that's staying in tune with who we have gotten to know as Soldier Boy, and
right,
and just but like and the same with like Butcher and pushing Ryan away at the beginning of the season, and I loved how they tie all these things together because because Butcher and his relationship with Lenny and Huey, which at least he did right by Huey in the Butcher way that he knows how to do it, and just by knocking him out so he wouldn't take the V again because of what Annie told him. But but it's consistent with Butcher.
Yeah.
And so I mean, and that's I mean, I think that's what's so great about these characters, and to your point, why we do get latched onto them, and even and if we think they're dead, we're just like, maybe there's a glimmer of hope that one of our favorites will come back.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's the boys. The show continues to do everything you want a show to do. And that's why we keep watching it, not because of the outrageous stuff that occurs, but honestly, because there's something about every single character where you're just like, I get you. I see it. Interesting. I like this game of chess that's going on. I don't know how long the game of chess can go, but so far I'm holding on. But and knowing Kripke, he's looking at the magical 5 seasons.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere, and maybe we talked about this, that he was planning 5 seasons.
Yeah, he likes that number. For any TV show. Yeah. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Amazon milks it for all it is, considering Supernatural went on for 15 seasons.
Yeah. That's why they have the spinoffs.
Yeah. Whenever they come out.
Yep.
All right. On that note, we will wrap up the boys and move on to Miss Marvel's season finale.
Yeah.
Another solid finish. Yeah. I don't have any complaints about the way this show ended. I definitely think, looking back on it, it had some pacing issues, and it almost feels like it told not totally two different stories, but it felt like there was definitely an A and B plot.
Yeah.
and there was this necessary but kind of unnecessary trip to Pakistan that occurred. That made you forget about not a lot, but a few things that were going on in Jersey. And
Yeah.
so this episode, when we come back to Jersey, it's like, oh yeah, there's this whole other all of this stuff going on here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I had that same feeling because, and I was talking to my wife this evening before we recorded. She watched it and the finale today, and I was like, the finale, because I really, after episodes 4 and 5, I mean, I know we talked about this. I know you had issues with like the suspension of disbelief. You could just like jump on a plane and go to Pakistan.
It was
like,
really hard to get over that.
Yeah, and some of the other beats when they were there, and then of course episode 5 felt like it was like truly 2 episodes and 2 different stories in like one episode, and there were some some things with episode 5, especially the back half of it when they got back to present day.
Yeah.
And Kamran, and present day when they opened the veil, that I definitely had some problems with. I thought it was just like completely rushed. And you send up to this point, you talk about piercing the veil and having like universe ending consequences, and then when it does happen, it's just like, oh, they just like basically Raiders of the Lost Ark these people, and then and Namja like sends her Noor to Kamran, and every and then she gets Raiders of the Lost Ark as well. So it was kind of like, okay, I felt like we had the writers' rooms weren't talking to each other when they were like constructing the season or something. I don't know.
Right. It definitely, you're introduced to all of the stories about Kamala and her and this bangle, and maybe that's where it felt like there were 2 stories, because there's Kamala and her family, and then there's the bangle story, which is entrenched in Kamala's lineage, but it feels like they were going along with Kamala figuring out the powers and the dynamics with her family and her friends and everything, and damage control. But because her powers at the moment are tied up in this bangle, we have to do a history lesson.
Yeah.
And then on top of a history lesson, we have to have a fantasy lesson, because this is a superhero show. So yes, there's history, but buried beneath that history, there's also a lot of this exposition about these clandestines and the Noor and all of this stuff that we probably will use and make deeper Marvel connections, but not at this moment. But it's important you know it, even though we're stopping the current story to tell you this. I see what you're saying, and I completely agree that like there's something about it which it didn't feel as cohesive as it could have been. And I honestly feel like this season could have just used more episodes.
Oh, totally. But I know Disney's locked into that 6. But because I was thinking, I thought about episode 5 and the story with her great grandparents, and part of me was just like, I kind of wish when Yusuf was talking about that story in the earlier episodes, they cut to it then and maybe flesh it out at that point, just the love story and all that. As far as the partition, I mean, because I almost feel like that, they the story in episode 5, having it, the past and the present kind of rushed, really undercut that story.
Right.
And then of course there was and then basically like Kamala like figuring out had the Harry Potter time travel rules where it was predestined to like set this path forward, and which part of me was just like, oh gosh, the Marvel MCU Loki rules of time travel and stuff. My head started to hurt trying to like figure out how they did it. And then finally I was just like, okay, they just went to Harry Potter rules of time travel, and that she was predestined to like go back and set things in motion to have Sana find her dad at the train station. I mean, that's basically all it was. And then when you fast forward to the finale and you see, you learn that she is a mutant, that, the finale like basically cleaned up a lot of the messiness of episodes 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
By bringing it back to Jersey and pulling all these various things together. And I think, and so the one thing I will say that I did like is that they did wrap up the whole clandestine stuff in episode 5, so that when we got to 6, it was all about Kamala. It was all about the community. All the things I loved about the first 2 episodes, setting this whole story up, were present in this episode and in the finale. And I think that was where this finale actually stuck the landing better than the other Disney Plus shows, in my opinion, to date.
I think it depends on. I agree that I think it's one of the better finales. And so in that point, I guess sticking the landing, yes, I do. However. Yeah, so if we're just talking about this in terms of it, like the episode alone and this finale, this is one of the better episodes of the season. And comparatively to the other shows, it's one of the better finales. Because it definitely did bring everything back to the heart of the show, which included her finally getting her costume from her mother, and then the fact that her father names her, literally.
Yeah.
Which that scene out of everything, and maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for father-daughter moments, but in particular, I really liked it. Really jumped out because I don't know if I missed it, but I just feel like there was so much focus, and rightfully so, on the mother-daughter dynamic that I don't think we saw a lot of him throughout the season and really understood what her relationship was like with her father. But when they used it really well, because that's one of my favorite scenes in probably the whole show so far. As well as her brother even showing up at the end and being like, I'm here to babysit. And her brother, I think he needs to be used more too, because even that small bit with Cameron about talking about, like, do you even like British Bake Off? Like, I was like, okay, I see you. Yeah, let's do a little bit more of this guy.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you with the moment there, with her father. I mean, that really is a testament to the strength of this cast. I mean, overall, there were so many moments that I think they delivered that family bonding and that family dynamic so beautifully, and you're right. I mean, that's definitely one of those moments that will stand out as far as them on the roof and talking about that, and even when we think back into the earlier episodes, see, like with the whole Adventure Con, and he was like trying to relate, just like a parent tries to do, and like, Daddy Hulk and Baby Hulk, it's just like, it could have been cringe, but it worked. And I think that's that. And I think that was what was missing for me in those middle episodes, when they went off to Pakistan, because that dynamic was just what was so great about this story. And so when they brought up, and whenever I was watching the finale, I just smiled whenever when we start out and she's talking to, sharing the news, and I'm a superhero, and they're like,
I'm light girl.
Yeah, I'm light girl. And he's like, really? And obviously, Alden already like gossiped about it, and I couldn't help but laugh about the speakerphone, because my mom does that too. She like always has her phone on speakerphone, and those and those are the elements I think that make this show work. It's just the humanity of it, and when you think about what we typically see our the Peter Parkers of the world and others, and the Clark Kents. I mean, they're orphans, they had tragedy, and in this family, it's all, there was the tragedy of the partition, but
that's not Kamala's.
That's not Kamala's. Exactly.
Yeah. No,
I mean, it's her history, but it's not driving what is making her become Miss Marvel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I just paused because I just had to think about that, because maybe, and I think I've said this on another show, is that I'm thinking about Stargirl right now. I'm just like, nothing bad happens to her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I hope I don't end up feeling that way about Kamala, but you're right, is that there's something endearing and refreshing about Kamala, and the fact that she has this very supportive family, to the point where now they all know. Yeah. And they all love her and are supporting her, even though they're cautiously supporting. And I think that just signifies, like, the next chapter, it's going to be, well, now we have a superhero who's also a teenage girl. How do we raise her? Mm-hmm. And that'll be interesting. It's funny because when you bring up Peter Parker, even in this finale, there's something so much about the show that reminds me of Homecoming.
Yes.
Specifically Homecoming. I think maybe, again, that's why the middle two episodes and the threat didn't work, is because Kamala, although she is Miss Marvel and has this amazing ability, she's like Peter Parker. She's a small town neighborhood superhero.
Yes.
She's not ready for the big stuff, people.
Yeah. She's not.
and it's not me just because she's a kid. It's just because there's something about her and her journey that she's on, where I think if you get too far out there, the earnestness about her gets washed away. And so it'll be interesting to see her in the Marvels. And we got a little tease of that. Some switching of places happening, some Freaky Friday stuff happening, and we'll see what that's all about. And will entail. But I think overall this was a solid show. I think it had probably the best, if not one of the best ensembles. Mm-hmm. Looking back on it, I think, and that's what the finale really reminded me about, is that we spent a few episodes creating this world of not only her family, but her extended, non-related family, and really fleshing out that world. So when the threat came, everyone was on the same side and united against it, whether they knew Light Girl was Kamala or not.
Yep.
And I think.
Yeah, that's another thing too, that, like, speaking to your point about Spider-Man and that community, and and that's that neighborhood level based hero, because because we had early on in the season, and they did that great connection between the rogue agent from the damage control and her insensitivities and the profiling that they were doing as far as keeping the mosque under surveillance. And I love how they were like, oh yeah, so she walked in, they all had their IDs and stuff, and again, just organically basically using this show to expose things that are happening in the real world. I mean, they, for example, and they did this with Captain America, for example, with the first Avenger. I mean, they used World War II. They used a real world event to talk about the superhero. And here in Miss Marvel, they had the partition, but also in present day, the Muslim profiling. Mm-hmm. And just how they just naturally just wove it into the story. And then the supervisor of the damage control was telling Agent Deaver stand down, but they set out when she walked into the mosque and didn't take her shoes off, just to from the very get, she was locked in, and we got the payoff in that on the back end with this when they went there looking for Kamran, at the end of the finale. So even though the damage control wasn't like, the universe ending threat of a Thanos, this Agent Deaver was consistent with our discussions of themes of community and threats. I mean, she was a threat to that community, and they banded around him to protect Cameron and Kamala when the moment called for it.
Right.
Which I think was a great thing. And then, and also I thought about what you mentioned Peter and growing in her powers. I mean, that was the other thing too, is like she, when she's like said embiggen. So that was a nice callback to the comic, because she is a at least the powers there are polymorph. And so they did show how she could like shapeshift a little bit. Again, it's not it's still a construct that they have like made her more like Green Lantern than the polymorph that she is in the comic. But it was a nice little touch. And then of course, obviously setting up the Marvels with her and Carol switching places, and can't wait to like see how I guess the Marvels will start with Kamala, like wherever Carol was, like fighting whatever thing that she was doing, and but also like weaving in the Kree, which basically this just basically confirms that the Bengal is from the Kree, and I guess and then they throwing out there with the other Bengal maybe captured by the British. I mean, we will either the Ten Rings, they're tying all these things together in Phase 4, and it's like a slow burn, and there's like a lot of like things that I know folks were kind of like gripe. There has been a lot more griping about Phase 4, but I'm starting to see where Feige's going, and we'll reserve judgment on Phase 4 because I still have to watch Thor, but I can't, like we always say, Feige we trust, right?
Right, absolutely. And on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me and tell me that you also pointed to the screen when you heard the X-Men music whenever they exposed her as a mutant, at Will M. Polk on Twitter, WILLMPOLK.
Okay, so follow me on Twitter at SJ Belmont, but I'm just going to do this plug because I think this is hilarious and so cool. If you're listening to this, please do me a favor and go to YouTube and search for Ateez cinematic trailer for the World Movement. This is a trailer that basically is a 4-minute, feels like a movie trailer that's for an album. Okay, so just watch it. I've never seen anything like this before. And yes, I'm a fan of them, but still. But all right. And please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd, friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and visit our website, www.cnnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, geek out. You're welcome.